Hello everybody, to pick up where we left. Now, further detailed explanations of test cases and sensor fusions for rear cross traffic alert systems will be discussed in this slide. Now, what are the functional test cases? The functional test cases are vehicle approaching velocity, vehicle approaching from right to right at 40 km per hour, pedestrian crossing behind 3 km per hour, two vehicles approach simultaneously. Now, these are all the various expected behaviors or the test scenarios, and the expected behavior should be, in all the cases, the rear cross traffic alert functionality, the RCTA functionality must be able to detect. For example, when it is mentioned as vehicle approach from left at 20 km per hour, the system must detect and issue at 2.5 seconds before the collision risk. So this is the minimum time interval before which the warning is supposed to be issued by the functionality to the driver. Next is the environmental and edge cases. For example, heavy rain and snow. Even in heavy rain and snow, detection range may degrade, but still must detect the vehicles at greater than 15 meters. Okay, so even above 15 meters, even in heavy rain and snow, it must be able to detect. And low light conditions, even if the light is below 5 lux, then also the detection accuracy should be maintained. Direct sunlight into the sensor. For example, a sunlight vehicle is positioned in such a way that direct sunlight is glaring into the sensor, then also the sensor must be able to work correctly. And interference from nearby resources. Okay, this is very important. This is where the EMC test, electromagnetic compatibility test, come into picture. It must reject the noise and vehicle reversing on the slope. So even when the vehicle is reversing on a slope, it must compensate for the pitch angle. It must not give any kind of false negatives. Last but not the least, the fail safe and robustness tests. Let me take a small pointer. Yeah, one sensor blocked system should notify the driver of degraded performance. Now this degraded performance, I'm sure you understand what is the meaning of degraded performance. And next is CAN bus communication failure. Okay, if at all any communication is failing, then the RCTA should shut down gracefully. I mean, it should not give any false alerts, or it should not affect any other functionality. These are the requirements. And the high CPU load and other active must maintain a latency less than 200 milliseconds. Okay, as I said, lesser the latency, the more real-time operating scenario. Next is sensor fusion approaches for RCTA. All right, since this RCTA is relying on multiple sensors for reliability, whether it is a radar or radar plus sensor, radar plus camera or radar plus ultrasonic, there are a couple of more than one sensor. So naturally, sensor fusion comes into picture. Long range works in rain and snow. Lower angular resolution, primary detection for vehicles. Ultrasonic, good for short range, low cost. Limited range, slow updates, and typical use in RCTA is parking assist plus traffic backup. And next is rear camera. It must be have high resolution. It must be able to identify the object. And the main con of this or disadvantage of the camera is it is poor in low light affected by dirt. And typical use, what is the typical use in RCTA? It object classification, whether it is a pedestrian or a car, it clearly identifies. Now, what are the various fusion strategies? First and fusion strategy is radar plus ultrasonic fusion, and this works by radar detecting distant vehicle while ultrasonics cover field blind spots. Okay, and data is fused at object level, tracking consistency checks. So at the object level, the data is fused. All right, and what is the OEM requirement? And OEM requirement is it must reject false positives, and latency should be 150 milliseconds for combined processing. Now, uh, in case you are thinking that latency, I am re-emphasizing, this is very, very, very important because there's absolutely no point or no efficacy or the functionality if the latency is high. If the real-time operating condition is very distant from the real-time operating scenario, then the efficacy of this whole functionality drastically comes down. Next is radar plus camera fusion. Well, this can be a AI-based fusion, Kalman filter plus deep learning object recognition, or radar provides distance while camera classifies objects. Now, a clear explanation of the fusion is given in the section concerning the fusion. In the OEM requirements, it must pass ISO 26262. It must align with radar detection plus or minus meter accuracy. Now, this is the accuracy level required. And triple sensor fusion used in high-end vehicles for redundancy. OEM requirements example. Okay, let's see some OEM requirements example. If one sensor fails, system should meet greater than 80% detection accuracy. All right, so because number of sensors are increasing, the detection accuracy is decreasing. For example, if it was only one sensor, then the detection would have been 99%. If it is two sensor, detection would have been greater than 90%. Now, because it is three sensors, the detection accuracy drastically came down to 80%. But still, 80% accuracy is reasonably accurate. Now, what are the various challenges that Tier 1 encounters during RCTA sensor fusion? The biggest challenge is sensor misalignment. Require auto calibration during vehicle startup. During vehicle startup, there will be a slight vibration. This may cause some sensor misalignment. Next is conflicting object tracks. Use voting logic. Example, 2 out of 3 sensors must agree. Now, what exactly is this voting logic? That is beyond the scope of this particular training program. But you can understand that when 2 out of 3 sensors are agreeing, that means the exact identification or the exact perception is correct. Next is real-time processing. Mandate hardware accelerated algorithms. Okay, this real-time processing is very, very important. Next is just to give a summary of the OEM expectations. The test case, it must cover the various real world scenarios, edge cases, and failure modes. So all these things must be clearly encompassed in test cases. Next is sensor fusion. Should improve detection accuracy, reduce false alarms, and degrade gracefully. Now, this is something which I have very thoroughly emphasized. And of course, compliance. Without this, the vehicle cannot be sold in the market, or the Tier 1 cannot sell to the OEM. ISO 26262, UN R1518, and OEM specific cyber security rules. All these things are of extreme importance. Now, let's briefly touch upon the FUSA requirements. Now, I already informed you that this is not exactly a critical or fatality level critical functionality. For example, if it fails, it may not exactly cause fatality because this is used in reverse gear, and in reverse gear velocity is very low, and at the low velocity, even if there is some collision or even if there is some mishap, the probability of the injury or severe injury to the driver is very less. That's the reason SLB is suffice. Now, how do you do this? Come to the conclusion that it is SLB. First, you do hazard analysis and risk assessment. In case any doubts, I thoroughly encourage all of you to go through the section on functional safety, which is a part of this training program. RCTA fails to detect an approaching vehicle. Accelerating B, moderate risk of injury in the parking sensors. Now again, one more hazard, RCTA false alerts. Now this is further lower risk, so ASIL A should suffice. All right, now let's see some examples of safety goals and requirements. The RCTA shall detect cross traffic vehicles with 90% accuracy. This is a safety goal, and with a ASIL level of ASIL B. It must use redundant sensor checks. Example, radar plus camera confirmation. Now this is where the voting logic also comes into picture. Okay, and system shall not issue false alerts due to sensor noise. Implement signal validation. RCTA fails, the driver shall be notified within 1 second. The dashboard warning is available. If the RCTA fails, the dashboard shall be notified within 1 second. But if it fails, it is not exactly critical. So that's the reason ASIL-B should suffice. And next is system shall not interfere with braking or steering. Now, this is again very important. Now this is SLD. Sorry, it's got slightly deleted. It is SLD because it should not interfere with any kind of any other functionalities like AEB or braking or steering. Okay, so this is exactly why this SLD is important. Next is technical safety requirements. What is the technical safety requirement? The fault detection and reaction time. Sensor failure must be detected within 100 milliseconds. Now this is extremely important. And also system must enter safe distance within 500 milliseconds. These are important fault detection reaction time requirements. And next is software and hardware safety mechanisms. Understand these things, memory protection, watchdog timers, CRC checks. These are all extremely important. These are the technical safety requirements which are derived from functional safety requirements. And diagnostic coverage is greater than 90%. Next is verification and validation. The FUSA testing, well, everybody knows what is meant by fault injection testing. Now, this is again a part of the verification and validation. Safety case should prove compliance with ISO 262 via safety audits. Okay, so the clear development interface agreement, the clear safety case must be provided by the tier 1 to the OEM. Last but not the least, what are the cyber security requirements? I request all of you to pause the video and go through these things very carefully, because reading all these things may be slightly time taking. But anyway, I'll just touch upon. First of all, based on threat analysis and risk assessment, some for risk level of high, medium, high, low, or decided, and then also the mitigation requirements are also required, or mitigation requirements also formulated. Next comes the cyber security requirements. The boot requirement, the firmware integrity, the intrusion development detection system, secure diagnostics, encrypted data storage, all these things are of utmost importance. And next is, of course, cyber security testing and compliance, which comprise of penetration testing, certification, which are legal requirements which must be complied to ensure that they are sold to the OEM, or OEM can sell them in the market. Now let's briefly touch upon the summary of key OEM expectations. SLB compliance for fault detection, redundant sensor checks, diagnostic coverage, and of course cyber security, which I just now touched upon. Okay, so these are all the various requirements which are discussed during the requirements elicitation. Thank you.